France 24. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is The World This Week. With us is Craig Kapitas, correspondent at large for Quartz and The Atlantic. Ulrike Koltman, whose latest book is Walking Tours of Paris, but more high voltage stuff with your next oeuvre, which will be on France's nuclear industry. Nupur Tiwari of India broadcaster NDTV, and Judah Grunstein of World Politics Review. The week began for Europe, by the way, for the with all eyes on the European summit, and it began as well with the comments of the Education Secretary of the UK. The EU summit seeing France and the EU summit seeing the French and the Germans putting aside differences for the most part on where to go forward. But ahead of that meeting, François Hollande, speaking to 6 European newspapers, had come out with some good news, saying that when it comes to the euro crisis, we're almost near the end. The light is there at the end of the tunnel. Ulrike Kolterman, good news all around then, according to François Hollande. That didn't go down very well here in Paris, though.
He has to say something, because for a long time he didn't say anything about his European plans. So at least finally he came out with something, and it wasn't that new. I mean, his idea of Europe going on with different speeds and having concentric circles. A few days ago, the German finance minister Schäuble had a very similar project, and I think Germany and France are going basically in the same direction. There's a lot of conflict about details, but the idea is not that new.
The French press roasted François Hollande for saying that, though.
Yeah, but he wants to present himself as a new leader and as someone who has something to say in Europe, so he had to sell some good news. But obviously, if you see the French economic figures, it's not that good news.
Now, there was, ahead of that summit, a lot of hopes that there would be some clarity, and what comes out of it, I got to say, is a little bit of confusion. When Europeans awoke this Friday morning, they were greeted to news that Europe leaders had struck a deal to unify the oversight of the continent's banks. Then, though, it appeared that it would only extend to all of Europe's lending institutions sometime in 2014, prompting tweets of confusion, including this one, from Queen of Europe, saying, Euro summit in brief, we agreed to put in place the legislative basis for further disagreement, #UCO, #Tschüss. Well, the real Angela Merkel, who originally was against exposing her country's troubled regional banks to outside scrutiny, certainly seemed to be a little bit dragging her heels at the summit's closing press conference.
If a new authority of 200 or 400 people that has yet to be established doesn't even have a legal framework as of today, October 19th, then I don't believe that any attempt to achieve this by the end of 2013 would be better than where we currently stand. This is as clear as day.
Nupur Tiwari, it's also clear as day is that that's hardly a rousing endorsement of that new banking supervision body.
Well, you know, we were talking about François Hollande a while ago and now Angela Merkel. At the end of the day, they're both politicians. You know, they have to think about their little elections. They have to, you know, Merkel clearly is thinking about September 2013.
Absolutely, that's the only
so
reason.
she has to put the brakes. And François Hollande was given this mandate by the French people because he kept on talking about growth, and he always wants to project himself as this very positive thinking leader who's constantly talking about solidarity. So they're playing their little roles and they're getting along slowly with what they think they need to do. At the same time, what Hollande said about the crisis nearly being over, I think, to be fair, if you go back to the actual interview, which I read just before coming in over here, he was really talking specifically about the Brexit, Greece going out of the euro and the euro exploding. So in that sense, maybe that is not something that we're talking about today, and that's what he meant to say. But at the same time, all of this is just, it keeps coming back in doses, I don't know in 10 years from now if you're going to look back and say that the European policymakers botched it up or not, but really, I think this time Angela Merkel really could have gone a little faster, and I think there has to be a little bit more pressure for these people to react more.
That's an important point, because Ulrike Koltermann, it sounds like she's going back on stuff that had been agreed upon in June.
No, I don't think so, but what you said is just perfectly right. She faces elections in September and also regional elections in Bavaria, for instance. So these are the main reasons for her to try to keep this process as slow as possible.
The thing to remember about the banking union is that the banking union is an effort to separate bank bailouts from state bailouts, so that governments don't increase their debt. In other words, the bailout has been being sent to the government of the country, and then the government bails out its banks because there's no structure in place right now. So what this is to do is to simply separate that so that the European Stabilization Fund can bail out banks directly, and therefore government debt doesn't go up, and the governments can continue lending for other things. The thing is, though, that's great because it keeps borrowing rates down for governments, but it's still German money that's going to be bailing out the banks because it's German contributions to the Stabilization Fund. So this doesn't change anything about Angela Merkel's political calculations, because she still has to try to put off going to German voters and saying, we need to pony up more money for other people's banks. And essentially, just one last thing about the euro crisis being over. The immediate sort of panic is over, but this whole sort of process is a long game of liar's poker, where everyone is pretty much bluffing, because the minute that anyone actually calls the other person's hand, everyone is going to lose. But right now, there are still very fundamental structural flaws in terms of the euro as a common monetary zone, that these reforms are just first steps to getting towards.
Very briefly on this point, can she hold out until that election, or does she have to use Judah's words, pony up with the money before then?
Well, she's got to pony up. I don't think she will. Angela Merkel and François Hollande, disproved the scientific theory that life cannot exist in a vacuum. They're doing their best to prove this. What? Look, think, folks. Spanish and Italian bonds, down. European stocks.
They're back up this week.
Yeah, no, they went down yesterday. I didn't see the closing market day yesterday at the end of the first day of the summit. Both stocks and bonds dropped. What do we have coming out of this? François Hollande is going to Greece. He's accepted the invitation to go and see the Greek situation firsthand. He should be going to the banlieues here. He should be going and talking to the businessmen here who are complaining that his tax rates are too high and more people are fleeing. The priorities here are skewed, because really, however way you want to cut this, how anyone at this table or listening and watching at home wants to cut this, the European Union is a contradiction in terms. It's not an elected group, as the Brits keep showing. Its central bank has no political basis, and until there is some sort of federalized Europe, we're going to keep using our favorite phrase on this show, kicking the can down the road. That's what we saw over the past 2 days.
And cue at that point the attitude across the channel. As we mentioned at the beginning of this part, the weeks began with comments from the Education Secretary in the UK, gleefully relayed by conservative tabloids. We're ready to walk out on Europe. David Cameron himself dancing around this issue of a referendum of whether or not to leave the European Union. Instead, at the summit Friday, threatening to veto the €1 trillion budget on offer for the 6 years that'll lead to 2020.
Look, I think it would be good to have a deal. It's good to settle these issues. But it just would not be acceptable to see, some huge increase in EU spending at a time when other budgets are being cut. And so the British public expect a tough approach, a rigorous approach, and that's exactly what they'll get. And if we can't get a deal, there's no point doing a deal that's a bad deal.
Craig Capitis, is that the right way to sort of wiggle around this issue? On the one hand, he's got growing pressure from his backbench to stage a referendum to walk out on Europe.
Look, this wiggling in England and the UK has been going on since the European Union was founded. There's nothing new here, as you know better than anyone here. The point here is that European leaders, no matter who they are, no matter what party, do not want to give up their sovereignty, and the populations do not want to give up their sovereignty to create the type of federated state that brings together, that allows people to have all the joys and the problems of a real democracy. They just don't want it. Everyone is out for themselves in this. And one of the sad things here is it's the Germans who are going to end up paying for it. And what amazes me is that, Miss Merkel and her new husband or boyfriend, Mr. Hollande, go around Europe like Mr. and Mrs. Charlemagne, saying that everything is just fine. It's not. The question that I've never been able to answer when I talk to economists and experts on this is how long can this can kicking go on until the whole thing implodes?
But if there were structural reforms in the other countries, Germany doesn't need to pay for everyone. That's the basis.
But that's when you. But here's the thing.
But David Cameron is not alone. I mean,
yeah.
It's okay. He's all the pressure that's coming from the backbenchers, the Tory backbenchers. I mean, he's still in a coalition. The Lib Dems are still around, and the Labour Party also has a lot of. Not as many Eurosceptics as Cameron would want to have.
The British want the European common market and nothing else.
That's
essentially
it.
That's their attraction.
And
the thing is that they also the rest of Europe kind of wants the legitimacy of having Britain along for the ride, but for the most part, Britain just sort of causes problems for the European Union by blocking just about everything.
But things may be coming to a head. You say, and you're right, that they're in a coalition with the more Europhile Liberal Democrats. However, a poll that was put out last week by the Sunday Times and YouGov asked Britons how they would vote in a hypothetical referendum on Britain's EU membership. 48%, nearly half, say they would leave. 32% would say that they would stay, and 20% were either unsure or wouldn't have no opinion on the matter. So 32% would stay, 48% would leave. The UK, home, by the way, to 45% of the continent's financial transactions, has much to lose in a Brexit, argues Philip Stevens in the Financial Times. He says there have been many crises in Britain's relationship with the EU. This one feels very different. The arrangement for banking regulation may provide a template for a new institutional architecture that effectively excludes Britain from decision-making across the single market. It may seem arcane and a bit nerdy to be talking about banking supervision in the world this week, but actually it is a big deal.
It is a big deal, and it is completely understandable that the British are getting nervous now, because there are two things. There's a banking union, but there are also the projects of Hollande and Schäuble to have this Europe of different speed, and that would probably exclude Great Britain. So it's completely understandable that they are getting nervous, but on the other hand, I think it's very stupid and dangerous from a politician to talk about a possible exit, because this is so unrealistic and no one
in any case they keep opting out of everything. So
but the thing is
that's their natural reaction.
When I saw that poll, though, I thought to myself, if you just changed the larger political body and you just polled people right now on anything, would you want to leave Great Britain or not? The Scots are for it. You talk to Catalonia in Spain. Do you want to leave Spain? Therefore, you talk to regions in France. I'm sure
that was discussed. That was discussed at the EU summit this week.
Right now, we're just at a point, a historical moment, where states are having a huge problem. Nation states are having a huge problem. regional organization. Everyone's having a problem right now.
It's a question of kick the bums out or let's get out.
Is anyone going to be better for having left?
But it's an awful time to have a referendum as well. I mean,
before we go, we have to mention this story. Eat your heart out, Angelina and Brad, introducing the movie marriage of the century. Bollywood stars Kareena Kapoor and Saif Ali Khan tying the knot Tuesday in Mumbai. The couple had been dating for 5 years, had appeared together on the silver screen. Nupur, this is, would you say, bigger than Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt?
Well, in India it certainly is, but you were calling it the wedding of the century. Well, I wouldn't go as far as that, because in India there's every 10 years there's a wedding of the century, and the last one happened about 6 years ago, and that was Aishwarya Rai, who's often called the most beautiful woman in the world. She married the son of of one of Bollywood's biggest names, actually, Amitabh Bachchan. His son got married to Aishwarya Rai. But this wedding, actually, there are a lot of interesting things, because not only is Kareena Kapoor the most profitable Bollywood actor, female actor in India, Saif Ali Khan is also an actor, but their families, they're very big names in India. And Indians do look at these established families, as it were, and all the combination of things that we are passionate about. There's Bollywood. So Kareena and Saif are both Bollywood personalities. And then, Saif is a royal. Well, the princely titles were taken away in India, but, that kind of nostalgia is still really big in India. And his father died recently, and he became the Nawab. So basically that is there as well. And the other thing is also that Kareena's family is also a big name in Bollywood. Her great-grandfather came to Mumbai in 1928 with €1 in his pocket, and he made it really big. He did theatre. All
so it's a parable.
Things, yeah, so all these things just make people dream, and which is why it's a big deal there. And otherwise, anyway, we are mad about weddings in India. There are 10 million weddings that happen.
Did they invite you to the wedding?
They didn't invite me. No. They had to. Yeah.
Well, in any case, even if they didn't, we wish them many happy returns. I want to thank you, Nupur Tiwari. I want to thank Craig Kapitas, Judah Grunstein, and Ulrika Coleman. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.